I am so excited. I have a very special guest today. Angel Tuccy is here with me. She is an award-winning speaker, a radio host, a TV producer, a PR media specialist, and a 15-time best-selling author. Oh my gosh, that's a lot. Angel, welcome to the show.
Oh my gosh, Elizabeth, I am so excited to be here today. Yeah, when you start listing off the accolades, I'm like, well, that explains, right? Some of the wrinkles, right? For sure.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot. How did you get here? How did you like so much to unpack? Like you have such an extensive background. Um, where do you want to start?
Well, that's a great question. Well, I'm no spring chicken. So, right, like I've got a few years under me, and I think that's one of the best pieces of advice, right? You don't have to do it all at once. You just start, right? And you just keep going and it starts to stack up. I think a lot of times, right, we're talking about the power to pivot and where did I start and how did I get here? I actually started as a podcast host, believe it or not. And my show was discovered, Elizabeth, by my local radio station, right? So my best-selling book, Get Discovered, it's not just a clever title, it's actually my story. And even right now, my son is a YouTuber and he has recently gotten discovered. He's been featured on 30 different blogging sites and YouTube sites are mentioning him for a video that he put out. So I got discovered, right? My radio show or my talk show, my podcast got discovered, and I was invited to become a radio talk show host,
Oh my
right? And
gosh.
now which is pretty incredible for like a girl like me, right? I almost didn't graduate high school because I couldn't graduate. I couldn't pass my public speaking class. I fear speaking, fear of standing in front of my peers, like total, like my voice left, butterflies, like dry mouth, the whole thing. But God bless my teacher. He gave me a passing D, right? Because I showed up and so I was able to graduate because it was a required credit in order to graduate high school. So I almost didn't graduate high school because I couldn't speak in front of a crowd and super shy, super introverted, and being invited to be a broadcasting host, right? To be in broadcasting, didn't go to school for journalism, didn't have a background in it, but our show was professionally produced by a producer who was producing our podcast at the time. This was in 2008, and they loved it and invited us in to be, to have our own radio show. And my very first day in the studio, I took my headphones off, Elizabeth, after doing our first episode, our first broadcast. And I thought, this is what I want to be. I loved like being alone in the studio, me and the microphone, my producer making me sound good, right? Giving me tips and cues in my ear. And I just thought, this is what I want to be. This is going to be the best career. And I just put my head down and for the next 10 years dedicated myself to being the best talk show host that I could be. And I had an amazing career because of it.
That's fantastic. First of all, congratulations and congratulations to your son. That's fantastic as well. Um, I'm curious, like, was this a live show that you ended up, which is very different than a pre-recorded podcast?
Yes, yes,
So,
for sure.
what was going through your head as this is coming up before that first show? What were
Yes,
you
right. Yeah, to
thinking?
go from pre-recorded, edited, right? Something you could stop and start if you needed to a live broadcast. And not only was it live, it was live 5 days a week. And so we had to come up with content, right? You go from hosting a show one time a week, perhaps, and that's all we were doing, bringing in your guests, figuring out the content, right? The flow of the show, to now hosting a daily talk show. You know, there's no downtime, there's no dead air, and um, no experience in that space. But I'll tell you what I did, Elizabeth. I just pretended, right? We kind of came up with our flow and our outline of what we would cover in every segment. And I just pretend I was talking to my mom, right? I knew my
Okay.
mom was one of my biggest fans. I could picture her face. And what I realized is if you're on screen or you can't see your audience, in a time where maybe you're just recording or it's just you in the studio, if you picture and you can imagine the person you're talking to, it changes the cadence of your voice and the rhythm of your voice. It actually softens it, warms it up, because you're actually talking to somebody and having a conversation with them versus I'm talking at, right? And I'm reading a script, I'm talking at. And so that was my first thing, was just pretended I was talking to my mom, and it turned out I kind of had a knack for it. And live almost gave us more permission to be real than
Ooh, okay.
the editing, right? Or the pre-recording. Because in pre-recording, you're going to go back, you're going to take things out you didn't want in there. If you flubbed up, you're going to remove that, the ums and the ahs, right? The filler words. You can't do that with live. And so it almost gives you more permission to be real, to make mistakes, to figure out how I'm going to overcome if I just made a mistake. Nope, I really didn't want to say it like that. I didn't want to say it that way. So let me rephrase that. And in the moment, take the audience through. I'm going to shift that over, and I'm going to redo that, or we're just going to move on. And that's okay too.
I love it because you are in the moment, in real time, in front of an audience,
Yeah,
working
our audience
yourself through
had a
mindset.
reach of about 5 million people, right? That our
Ooh.
audience reached. So it was, yeah, real time in the moment, listening to their cars, laughing, crying, yelling at me, whatever they wanted to do.
Oh my God. Was there one specific interview that maybe stands out for you as either the most challenging or one
Mm.
where you were like, I nailed that?
Yeah, so over 2,500 broadcasts that I did, and interviewed over 5,000 guests during my career. The most challenging, we every Friday we would open up our phone lines, and we hosted a program called Fan Bragging Friday. And Fan Bragging Friday, you called in to brag about a great customer experience. So in Denver at the time, there was a competitive show where they were like a consumer watchdog. So you could call up and say, I hired this roofing company and they took my money and they scammed me, like go get them. Right. So we came at it as the opposite. We want to know, I hired that roofing company and they nailed it. Like they over delivered and they were awesome and they sent me flowers, right? And they were rock stars. So we called it Fan Bragging Friday. People call in, rave about great customer service. Anywhere they, mom and pop stores, big, anything. Well, there was a shooting in Aurora at a movie theater Thursday night. And Friday morning is Fan Bragging Friday. So we're supposed to be like all rah rah and excited and peppy. But had just down the street, not 5 miles from where we broadcast, had been this mass shooting overnight. And we had to go live on the air. And I, again, no media real background, no media training for me in this space, but to really be there for our audience and to give them support and give them an opportunity to just call in and express how they were feeling that day. And yeah, I, I had to show up and be professional, and the show had to go on, right?
Mhm.
Like I didn't want to, didn't want to be there at all. I didn't want to be talking about it, and let alone leading the conversation about it. But that was my job, and so it was a day that at the end, when I look back at it, I was just really proud of how our whole team, how the whole staff came together and rallied for the community. And it opened up some other events and things that we ended up doing. But I was just really proud of what I was a part of, and realized how powerful this microphone is.
Mhm.
And now, with podcasting, the reach that we have is beyond what we had even in radio, right? We had airwaves and we were limited by the airwave reach. Podcasting, you don't have any limitations like that. But how powerful our voice really is, and good or bad, doesn't matter. Like it is powerful. And so I think that's just one of the days I was just most proud of the position that I was in.
I can't imagine walking in that day and just the overwhelming anxiety of having to lead that conversation. But
Yeah.
it sounds like something that the community would have appreciated for sure.
Yeah.
Just to bring everybody together as a space to heal.
Yeah. For sure, for sure. And again, never thought I'd be in that space, right? This is all fun and games, right?
Right.
We're just here having a good time. And so it just kind of made it very, very real. But on the flip side, I got to meet and interview some amazing, amazing people, dignitaries. We had consulates and people from other countries. We celebrities, local celebrities, and actors, actresses, authors. I mean, we just had so much fun, and got to be in the middle of all of it. And there were days I was just like, pinch me, because like, how did I get here, right?
That's amazing.
But I'll tell you, it was because, and so even though I really didn't feel like I was prepared, I wasn't trained for that. There was nothing that said I should have been in that seat, but the opportunity came and I said yes.
Mm.
And I allowed myself, even though I didn't know exactly all the details and the what's and the how, and I had a whole lot of things to figure out training wise, how to interview, how to come in and out of commercial breaks, right? How to guide a conversation, like just so many things I had to learn, technology and systems and FTC rules, and how to take care of your sponsors. I mean, it was a university, like, fast, but we had a great team. I had a great producer, just great support in the community. And I'm glad I said yes, even when I didn't exactly know what I was saying yes to.
But that's so important, right? Because you've said so many things so far in this conversation. You got in that booth and you were in the zone. You just knew you were in the right place, even though you're like, who am I to show up and be part of this broadcast? You let yourself be uncomfortable and you just surrender to that unknown and let it
Yes.
be new and clunky and uncomfortable. And then suddenly one day you're like, oh, I really am good at this. Look at me. Which that's that's the story of every entrepreneur. you know all of us go through this cycle of, who am I, what am I doing, I don't understand. And I love the fact that you did not give up,
Mm,
because it's very uncomfortable to be uncomfortable,
yes.
and it's a scary place, especially in front of that many listeners. You're very vulnerable on the air. Not an easy thing to do. And I think it's important, if you get to that place where you realize you're in that zone,
Mm.
don't give up and let it be uncomfortable for you, because eventually that's failure's just data. You learn what works, you learn what doesn't, and you keep going. You take that, you run with it. What's
I,
next? What's next?
I love that. Failure is only data. I'd heard it's not failure, it's feedback, right? Yeah, and that's it. Like, you can't fail unless you quit, right? If you quit and walk away, then that's, and sometimes it's important to quit, right? And so when things aren't right, quitting is not, is always a bad thing, but you won't fail at it if you just keep going and you keep trying, and every day just take one step forward. It might be a little cha-cha, right? Step forward, a couple steps back, right? That's life. And I think sometimes we just think it's going to be easier. Like, if once I'm on the path, it's just going to be full steam ahead and easy, but it just, you end up around another corner, and a different challenge appears that you weren't expecting. And I think that's part of what makes the journey worthwhile, right? Because you can't you can't know pure joy if you've never felt sadness, right? You won't celebrate the success, you won't celebrate the wins if you didn't have challenges along the way to remind you that, like, I kept getting up, I fell down, I stumbled, I sucked at it that day, right? But I showed up the next day and I did it again, and I didn't let any one moment define me, good or bad. And they say you're only as good as your next, right? Your next song, your next sale, your next, right? And so even in all of our successes, like, we still show up the next day and, all right, now how do we do it better today?
How did
And
you feel like you got to that place? Because I think I work with people looking to start, right?
mm,
And they're in that pre-launch phase. And I was this too. When I opened my first business, I'm like, I've been baking my whole life. I got this. Opened the doors, and it was like, fell flat on my face the first couple of months. And I'm
mm,
like, it made me question, what is wrong with me? What have I been doing? It's this really hard place to be. So how do you, what tips do you have for someone who's in that space of, I'm really failing at this and I think I need to give up? What did you say to
Yeah.
yourself to say, nope, I'm going to get up and I'm going to show up tomorrow?
So, so can I tell you the story of when I left broadcasting?
Sure.
Yeah. So, we were saying how you don't always quit. Like sometimes it's okay to quit, right? The fit isn't there. And I had changed stations and changed stations, and I found myself in a really toxic work environment. And it was really difficult to be at work, right? Just the support, the environment, it was incredibly toxic. But I was in contracts, right? I had to show up, I had to go to work. And one day I showed up, and by this time, I was now hosting two daily talk shows. I hosted my business talk show that we had started, and then I was also had been invited to be the host of a second talk show. It was a Christian lifestyle show, so talking to moms in minivans, taking their kids to and from work or school. And so I was doing 4 hours of talk radio every day.
My God. It's
So
like
started out
exhausting.
started out with 30 minutes a day when I started. We grew, became the morning show, like then added so lots of shifts and dynamic changes in that. But walked into my studio one day, all prepared to do two back-to-back shows, and they were back-to-back shows. I had a 6-minute commercial break in between shows, changed studios and did a whole reset and did a second show. So uh, when I look back on it, I'm like, who does that and why, right? But that was the gig, right? And so, but walk into the studio, and my producer calls me in 5 minutes before we're going live on the air for the first show. And he says, Angel, I've made a change. We've made a change. Station's made a change. And handed me my cardboard box and invited me to pack up my stuff, and was escorted out of the building. Now, in media and broadcasting, they never give you any warning, right? If they're going to take you off the air, because they don't want you to go rogue on the air and say something you shouldn't,
Right.
right? They want to control the narrative completely. And so there was no warning. There was no, just one day we were just off the air. And this was a time, Elizabeth, where I'd been in broadcasting for 10 years and had a good career, but I was ready. I was just so drained from the experience that I had been now in for 2 years, that it was like I was excited, like, yay, the shackles have been removed and I'm free to go do something different. But at the same time, just being told by anybody who knew me, right, from the industry, friends, family, that I needed to stay in broadcasting, right? Like, you have to find another job. You've got to stay in broadcasting if you want to have you can't not be on radio. And my kids at the time, my two oldest, had decided they were moving from Denver to Florida. So I was becoming an empty nester. My son was going away to college. Husband and I married 20 years. So that really risky, vulnerable space in our marriage where the kids are gone. And now wife is depressed because she just lost her job and her career.
Wow.
I mean, I was just a recipe for depression and just, tub of ice cream and Netflix binging, right? Like, that was all I was good for. And everybody telling me I needed to stay in broadcasting. And I would go to my office during the day and everybody tell me that. And I'd come home at the end of the day, and my husband would meet me at the door with a glass of wine, and I would just cry. Right. I'm like, they all tell me I have to stay, and I don't want to stay. I just know I'm supposed to be doing something else. And after 3 days of this, he said, Angel, stop going to the office. He's like, they're telling you, like, they're just giving you advice that's against what you are feeling in your heart. So we went away for the weekend, and I'm like, just get me out of town, right? Get me away. I went to a Chamber of Commerce networking event, and they're like, oh, right. Oh, I miss you on the air. And, the head tilt, and everybody's like pulling at me. And I just knew, Elizabeth, I wasn't meant to be in radio anymore. Like, it was time to spread my wings and do something different. I'd had a wonderful career, but I was done, right? And I was ready for a shift, but I didn't know what that shift was going to be. Believe it or not, 6 weeks prior to that, I had taken a public speaking class, on speaking on stages, just to improve, right? Because now I was invited to be MC and host a bunch of things. So I just was trying to get better at my craft and decided I was going to go and be a public speaker. I was going to travel the country as a public speaker. I signed on with uh, an expo convention. They hosted 17 events across the country. I signed on to be a speaker at all of them. And I went off on the road and decided I was going to teach entrepreneurs and organizations how to do their own PR, right? I mean, it's what I knew, how to get booked on radio, what happens if you're an author, to get your book out there, to do these book signing tours, to do these radio tours. I knew exactly what to do and how to do it. And I aligned with some great people, some great speakers, some great conferences. And during that weekend away with my husband, I wrote my whole outline, what I was going to speak on, what I was going to sell, what the package was going to look like. Right? I mean, I was ready to go. And I went to my first conference and I sold nothing. And I went to my second conference and I sold nothing. And I went to my third conference and I sold nothing. And I was invested in these, Elizabeth. I had paid to be a conference speaker, to have, to be a vendor. I was paying for my own travel. I was buying banners and flyers and, swag, and I was paying for my hotels. I mean, I was pouring out money like there was no tomorrow. And fourth event, nothing. Four big goose eggs in a row, Elizabeth. And I was now over my head in debt. The money was just flowing out. Who was I to think I could be a public speaker? Right? I didn't graduate high school. I barely didn't graduate high school because of it. And who was like the head trash, the thoughts, the worry, the concern, the financial pressure, my husband looking at me like, what are you gonna do now? So I was committed, right? I was committed. I was all in. And so I had a friend who was good at it. Had met a speaker who was good at it. And I decided I was just going to be a student. I was going to emulate. I was going to watch him. I was going to study. I was going to learn. I was going to pay attention to those that were doing really well. And I went to everything. I learned, I studied, I watched, I crafted, I tweaked. And um, my next event, I think I came out with $12,000 in sales.
That's amazing.
Hot diggity dog.
Right? You're like, woo, I can do this.
Like, okay, all right. It won't all be like that, but at least I know I can do it. And I've had one success, and one success can turn into another. And so I ended up then with a 15-month career as a public speaker before the pandemic shifted all of that. And you had to pivot again.
Oh, yes. And now, everything's online and different environment.
Completely different environment. But I'll tell you what, Elizabeth, it was like coming home for me. Because what did we all do? We all went into our homes and turned our dens and our bedrooms and closets into studios.
Yep.
Right. And we're now all doing virtual calls and virtual conferences and virtual meetings and virtual events. And I was back in a studio again. And I just felt like this was perfect for me. And I started doing a daily talk show again. I started helping podcasters get guests and bringing people together. I started the new Facebook group called Need a Guest, because people were always coming to me saying, Angel, I need a guest. I'm like, I got you. I got Elizabeth. I'll set you up. I'll play matchmaker. And ended up starting this Facebook group that, again, pivoting, paying attention, watching the signs. And that Facebook group, it took 2 years to hit 10,000 members in the Facebook group. And we were everything. If you wanted radio, television, magazine, summits, we were everything. And then December of 2022, met up with Jamie Atkinson. He was networking in my group. He's from Costa Rica. And he says, Angel, how are you monetizing this group? I'm like, not, right? I'm just playing matchmaker. I'm just making introductions for people. He's like, I think I can help. Do you want some help? And we decided to focus in on really serving podcasters and elevating podcasters in this space and making it easier for podcasters to find guests and even potential sponsors, giving them more exposure and visibility. And in the next 15 months, we tripled the size of that Facebook group from 10,000 to 30,000 subscribers, and really now serving the podcasting community.
And it's so I am part of that group. It is fantastic for networking, finding guests, sharing your story, getting booked on other shows. It really is a fabulous resource. So if you are a podcaster listening, need a guest on Facebook, look it up or reach out. I'd be happy to direct you to Angel and the crew.
Thank you.
Because it really has been, there's so many great resources in there. I love that your story is just, I'm not giving up. I love that you said you let yourself be a student, because it's really easy to settle into what we know and like grip the control of what we know and hold on to that.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting in my bake shop 6 months in, and I had failed flat on my face, wasn't making money, bleeding money left and right. And I felt like such a failure. And it was another day of me just throwing stuff out, not knowing what I did wrong. And I'm like, I never want to feel like this again. But I also knew I wasn't ready to throw in the towel. But that was the moment I'm like, something has to shift. And that was me. I had to let go of like, this is going to be a certain way. I had to let go of that control and let myself be a student of entrepreneurship and a student of marketing and a student of packaging. And there was, I had sold for other people, but I never sold for myself. I had done all the mechanics of business in the realm of somebody else's corporation.
Yep.
Now I had to show up and be me with my products, and that's a completely different level of selling.
I bet it is. I know. And we think, right? I've done this. I've got experience. I know, like, how hard can that be? And then when it doesn't work, and we realize if I've got to learn a new way, you're right. Like, I should know this. I think that's the thing. Like, I should know this. I'm this far ahead in my life in this game. I should know this. And because I think I should know this, I beat myself up that I don't. But yeah, we've got to get out of our own way.
Just turn the should off.
Yes.
Maybe will, can, let's change the verbiage a little bit.
Right.
So you have 15 books.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. I wrote 3 and I'm like, I kind of got the nudge for another one, but like 15 books. What are we talking about in these books? And they're all bestsellers. So
yeah.
tell
So
us.
my very first one. So for a long time, that was kind of a dream for me. I wanted to publish a book. And my very first one was published in 2009. I didn't know anybody who had published a book, Elizabeth. Like the world I was in, we had just been on the air for maybe 3 or 4 months when I published the first book. So I didn't have anybody in the space. I didn't know any authors. I didn't know anything. And so kind of joined forces with a friend of mine. We were going to figure this out. And I wrote my first book, got the idea coming home from a camping trip. I'm an avid indoorsman, not your outdoor girl, right? But coming home from a camping trip, and I was making a list, and my kids they're like, Mom, you make lists for everything. And I'm like, that's going to be my book, right? On how I use lists to keep myself organized and run and balance my career and family. So book number 1, Lists That Saved My Life. And it's just chapter after chapter. I have a packing list. I have a shopping list. I have a organizing list. I just had a list for everything. And I came up with my handful of lists. And that very first book opened up so much opportunity for me. I got to be on TV. I was invited to speak at places. I was elevated in the community, right? For being an author, doing book signing events, all this media exposure because of it. And we were selling lots of books. Well, the List That Saved My Life was about my personal life. And I wanted to leverage this for business. So came up with Lists That Saved My Business. And so book number 2 was Lists That Saved My Business. And those, I would have been happy with those 2. But ended up I had a friend of mine who wanted to put a book together. So we wrote a book together. And then I remembered that I had written this children's book that I had tucked away when the kids were babies. And I pulled it out, and my daughter, I was looking for an illustrator, and my daughter, who was 17 at the time, said, Mommy, I want to illustrate your book. And so she illustrated it. It's called Mommy Has Lots to Do. And so then I had a children's book. And so they just kind of, I tell people, like, they just start to flow out of you like water. And you just start, and there they go. So but my most recent is Get Discovered: How to Use Media Interviews to Grow Your Business, Your Book, and Your Brand. And that's really the space of how I got into media, leveraging what I call other people's audiences, doing 2 interviews a week, giving incredible content to the audience, supporting your host, your podcast host, your media, journalist, and then leveraging that to attract more ideal clients into your world.
That's amazing. Where can people find all of your books? Are they on Amazon or are they on your
I am,
website?
yes. So all of them are self-published, and they are all on Amazon, and super proud of all of that we've created there. Angel Tuccy, Tuccy is how you spell my last name. And so, yeah, you can find me on Amazon. If you Google, most of them will come up. Like I said, I'm not a spring chicken in this space. So there's some history here, and just staying at the game, right? Just staying and showing up every day. How can I do better? I mean, even here today, Elizabeth, it's a Saturday, right? I've got friends in town. We're gonna go over to Universal Studios later. I moved to Florida during the pandemic, and but I'm still doing 2 interviews a week, right? Like that's what I teach my clients. I still drink my own Kool-Aid, and that's how I make my impact and build incredible relationships. My biggest draw right now is I just want to build really beautiful, loving, authentic relationships with podcast hosts so that I can help you serve, because I know the power of this microphone. I know the power of this medium that you are in. And really, the podcasting world is as big as it might feel. It is incredibly new, young, and untapped. And there's a lot of potential that is still open to all of us in this space. So, Elizabeth, dear, I feel like we are just getting started, and we are just the tip
Woo!
of the iceberg of what the impact we're getting ready to make. I mentioned my son. He has a YouTube channel, was just featured on 30 different sites, one in Japan, one in France, several here in the United States. We, because I'm a journalist and my background is PR, I have access to this software that gives us a visibility reach. And I think, I just sent him the number, like 60 million people have seen these articles that he has done. It's been featured in.
Wow, that's
Um,
amazing.
it is amazing. Sorry, no, 39.8 million. I apologize.
I mean, whew, that's still a lot of people. Kudos to
But
him.
there's so much, right? There's so much, and now we can do it from wherever we are. I don't have to go into a studio. I sat in traffic, you know, 45 minutes in the morning, hour and a half on the way home. I could do this from anywhere. I could be on vacation. I could take this on the road. And I mean, I could come up with 3,000 reasons why podcasting, being a podcast host and guesting are so powerful. And if you're not leveraging it to make an impact, to grow your business, you're really missing out on a really powerful tool.
I love that your story is one that, like, commitment is just like a neon flashing sign above your head. You committed to all of it every step of the way. And I'm so excited for you for the next journey, and where everything that you've shared with us. I appreciate it. I'm sure so many people are going to get a lot of value out of everything that you've mentioned today. Before we wrap up, I'm curious if you have maybe 2 or 3 tips for someone who's getting started, either in terms of the PR or the marketing aspect of your podcast.
Yeah.
Um, some nuggets of advice and wisdom from your experience.
I do. I would love it. And we just actually recorded a 3-part audio series, Elizabeth. on really helping people to get started, to get their message out there, and how to even use our free Facebook group, right? The Need a Guest Facebook group. And but really the very first thing is it's a simple, it might actually it's not simple, it's a question. What problem are you solving? Right? If you can figure out what problem you're solving, like who's it for, then you'll know the messaging, you'll know the guests to bring in, the clients you want to work with, who's a right fit for that, what, and then how you'll serve them, like how you'll help solve that problem. But most of us are like, I want to do a thing, and which is fun. But if we're going to leverage this as a business, as into that entrepreneurial space, if we can solve a problem, then we can create an offer, and we can bring in clients, and we can be the answer to the question that they have. So number one, what problem are you solving? And then that leads you to, who is my ideal client, right? Perfect audience. What's my messaging? How am I going to, get that message out? What's my call to action, right? Where am I going to lead them to? And then what's my core offer that I'm offering, even as a podcast host, right? Leveraging to your show to attract your ideal clients. Though they might be sponsors, right? I mean, for us in radio, we were doing everything we could to make sure our sponsors were happy. So growing our audience base so that our sponsors would get in front of more ears, right? And eyeballs. And so think about, yeah, really, what's the problem you're solving? Then who am I solving it for? And then what's my offer? What's my offer at the end?
I love it.
Mm.
Simple steps, take some refinement over time, I think, because who you think you're talking to or what you think your mission is, if you're not super clear on it in the beginning, the more you dive in and do the work and stay committed, it's like peeling back an onion. I feel like it
Yes,
you
for
get
sure.
clear the longer you do it.
So one of
Um,
the things that we do, Elizabeth, with our clients when they first come in, we get them booked on 10 podcasts. And we do 10 podcasts so that they can do just what you said. Refine their message, tweak it. What you think it's going to be is probably going to change. So we want to road test this. We want to take it out, take it for a spin, see how it lands, see how it feels. And we find the best way to do that is like in action, and actually go do the do, right? So get you booked on your first 10 podcasts and see how it feels, see how it lands, stress test it, and then tweak it from there.
that's awesome.
Mhm.
Angel, thank you so much. Where can people find you, connect with you? We'll put all the links for social and all of your books on the show notes, but where can people reach out?
Well, we probably the easiest is go to needaguest.com. Needaguest.com, that's going to give you access to that 3-part audio series on how to leverage the Facebook group, how to actually get started and get yourself booked within 24 hours. And you'll have access to the community, and it's a free community where you can find guests and get booked at needaguest.com. Just start there, and that'll get you into the fold, and that'll get you into the community.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Angel. Appreciate it. Check out the Media Matchmaker, as she's called. We're going to wrap up the way we do every episode. You are never stuck. You are never lost, and you are never, ever alone. At any given moment, you can use your power to pivot, make a new choice, and start again. I'll talk with everyone on the next episode. Angel, thank you again.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
At any given moment, you have the power to choose a new path for your life. We hope these interviews inspire you to recognize that power to pivot within yourself. I'm your host, Elizabeth Miles, and I want you to remember you are never stuck, you are never lost, and you are never, ever alone. At any given moment, you can use your power to pivot, make a new choice, and start again. And I so look forward to seeing you on the next episode where we share more inspiring stories, tools, and tips to help you on your path.